When a man has no one but God, there comes a time in every man's life when the faces fade, the applause stops, the phone goes silent, and those who once stood beside him vanish. In that moment, when the crowd disappears and the friends are nowhere to be found, a man is left with only two things: the beating of his own heart and the presence of Almighty God. And make no mistake, that moment is not your destruction. That moment is your awakening, for when you are stripped of every crutch, you learn to stand. When there is no hand to pull you up, you realize the strength in your own legs. And when the only voice left is the voice of God, you start to finally hear the truth. It is in isolation, not in comfort, that purpose is born. When a man has no one but God, he begins to discover why he was created, not for the applause, not for the approval, but for a mission greater than himself. God does not show up to entertain your ego. He shows up to ignite your soul. The world may walk away, but purpose does not. You may lose friends, but you will find clarity. You may feel abandoned, but you are never alone. Because when a man has no one but God, he has everything he needs to begin again. But let me make this clear: God will not carry a man who refuses to move. Faith is not passive. It is active. It is bold. It is forward, moving. If you're waiting for a miracle, you are the miracle, but only if you choose to rise. When you align your mind with divine will, you enter into the most powerful partnership available to man. You plus the infinite wisdom of God is a force no enemy can conquer. That's not religion. That's spiritual law. That's universal truth. Many of the greatest men to walk this earth met destiny only after they were deserted. They stood alone, not because they were weak, but because they were being prepared to lead, and so it will be with you. If today you feel like you have no one but God, do not despair. Rejoice. You are standing at the beginning of something eternal, something unstoppable. You are being refined, reforged, rebuilt, because when a man has no one but God, he is finally ready to become who he was born to be. There is something brutally honest about adversity. When hardship comes, when loss, betrayal, or silence fills your world, it tears down the false walls you once believed were made of stone. You begin to see what you could not see when things were easy. The smiles that were fake, the loyalties that were conditional, the relationships that thrived only as long as you had something to offer. But adversity doesn't come to destroy a man, it comes to reveal him. When everything and everyone is stripped away, what remains is the truth. You're no longer distracted by noise. You're no longer sheltered by illusion. The layers of pride, denial, and dependency begin to fall. And what's left is something raw, something real, something eternal. You come face to face with your own soul and with your Creator. In that space, when the world has gone quiet and the lights have gone out, you find yourself staring at the one constant that has never left you, God. No titles, no network, no favors, just you and Him. And it is in that sacred silence that a man begins to understand. He sees that the things he thought were strength were often weakness. He realizes that the applause that once motivated him was nothing more than noise. That comfort had made him soft, that praise had made him blind, and that only now, in the solitude of suffering, can he finally hear what truly matters. This is the moment when a man is no longer held up by others, but by the fire growing in his own chest. The moment when truth becomes more important than approval, when legacy means more than luxury, when God's voice drowns out every whisper of doubt. This is where transformation begins, not in the crowd, but in the wilderness. Not in celebration, but in confrontation. When a man has no one but God, the illusion dies, and the truth begins to live. There comes a moment when everything familiar collapses. The money dries up. The friends disappear. The plans fall apart. And suddenly, the man who once stood surrounded finds himself standing alone in the storm. It's in that moment, when nothing earthly can hold him up, that he faces a decision. Either crumble under the weight of despair or lean fully into the one foundation that cannot be shaken, faith in God. See, when you've lost everything else, faith isn't just a nice idea anymore. It becomes oxygen. It becomes the one thing that keeps your spirit alive when your circumstances try to bury you. You begin to understand that faith is not about hoping everything goes your way. It's about believing there is a way even when everything has gone wrong. This kind of faith isn't born in comfort. It's forged in fire. When a man has no one else to turn to, God becomes more than a name. He becomes real, not a tradition, not a theory, but a presence that walks with you through every valley. You stop reciting prayers and start having conversations. You stop asking for a way out and start asking for strength to keep walking through, and something incredible begins to happen. The pain doesn't break you. It purifies you. The silence doesn't crush you. It sharpens your hearing. You start to recognize that peace isn't found in the absence of problems, but in the presence of God. And that presence, it doesn't need validation. It doesn't need approval. It doesn't depend on who stayed or who left. It stands on its own. Faith becomes the ground you walk on when the bridge is burned. It becomes the light you follow when the path disappears. It becomes the force that lifts your chin when your head hangs low. It is not weakness. It is your greatest strength. Because when a man has no one but God, he realizes he was never truly alone. And in that realization, he finds a power that the world cannot give and cannot take away. In the quiet hours of solitude, when a man is no longer distracted by the noise of others' expectations or the busyness of the world, he begins to wrestle with something far deeper than survival. He begins to confront the question of purpose. When there is no one left to impress, no audience left to perform for, and no applause left to chase, a man is finally free to ask, "Why am I here? What was I made to do?" That question does not come from fear. It comes from fire. This is where a man's definite chief aim is born, not in a crowd, not in comfort, but in crisis. It doesn't rise from a motivational book or a mentor's voice. It rises from within, from the voice that speaks when all other voices have gone silent. That voice is divine. That voice is not random. It's not emotional. It's calling you to rise, to remember, and to rebuild. See, when a man is broken and alone, he is closer to truth than he has ever been. In that brokenness, there is no ego left to protect, no mask left to wear, only the raw, unfiltered cry of the soul, and that is exactly when God speaks, not through thunder or spectacle, but in stillness. In that stillness, a man hears what he was too busy to hear before, the whisper of direction, the seed of vision, the first glimpse of what he was born to become. Purpose doesn't come when things are easy. Purpose comes when everything is at stake, and that aim, once discovered, begins to take root. It may not be clear at first. It may come in fragments, but a man who listens, truly listens, will begin to feel it take shape. A mission begins to form, a direction begins to unfold, and from that moment forward, life is no longer random. It becomes strategic. It becomes focused. It becomes sacred, because now that man has something worth enduring for, something worth fighting for, and he didn't get it from another man. He got it from God. That kind of purpose cannot be bought, borrowed, or stolen. It's written into the very core of who you are. But sometimes you must lose everything to find it. And when you do, you'll never be the same again. There is a power greater than any man can see, and when tapped into, it transforms a life from ordinary to unstoppable. Most people search for strength in numbers. They build teams, networks, alliances, all useful, yes, but incomplete, because even the strongest network will fail if the spirit behind it is weak. The most important alliance a man will ever form isn't with men, it's with God. The concept of a mastermind is often misunderstood. People think it's just a group of minds working together toward a goal, and that's true, but it's only the surface. The real mastermind, the one that births unshakable purpose and destiny, begins as a spiritual alignment. Before a man can ever build an external network that lasts, he must first be in harmony with divine intelligence, and that harmony isn't achieved through wishful thinking. It comes through surrender, intention, and obedience to a higher calling. When a man is in sync with the mind of God, he sees things differently. Obstacles become opportunities, delays become development, and rejection becomes redirection. You may not have advisors in your corner. You may not have a crowd to validate your steps, but if you are walking in agreement with the Creator, then you are walking with the greatest mind in existence, and with that partnership you lack nothing. Ideas will come that are beyond your own experience. Strength will rise that you didn't know was in you. The right people will enter your life at the right time, not by coincidence, but by design. And as you move forward, your steps will be guided not by fear or logic alone, but by wisdom that transcends the limits of man. When a man has no one but God, he discovers the mastermind that cannot be broken, bought, or corrupted. This is where miracles begin, not from man's hand, but from divine strategy. It doesn't matter who left. It doesn't matter who doubted you. When you're aligned with divine purpose, your life becomes proof that one man in union with God can change the course of history. Every man will face a moment where he is brought to the edge emotionally, spiritually, even physically. That moment does not come to destroy him. It comes to demand a decision. In that space between who he was and who he could become, there is a choice: grow or die. Rise or retreat, become more or stay broken. Adversity is not the enemy, it's the test. It exposes what's real, it strips away excuses, and it asks a simple question: what are you going to do now? This is where many men fall. Not because they're weak, but because they wait. They wait for someone to rescue them. They wait for circumstances to change. They wait for a perfect moment that never comes. But the truth is hard and simple. God will not carry the man who refuses to move. Faith without action is just fantasy. Hope without effort is just wishing. And if a man chooses to stand still in the face of adversity, he chooses to surrender his own destiny. But the man who moves, even when it hurts, even when he's afraid, even when he has no map, that man is blessed. Because every step he takes in faith is a declaration: I will not be defined by my pain. I will not be broken by this season. I will not wait for life to hand me power. I will build it, one faithful step at a time. There is sacred power in movement. When you take action with faith as your engine and God as your guide, you begin to unlock doors no man can shut. You begin to grow, not just in strength, but in wisdom. You see who you are. You learn what you're made of. And more importantly, you become the kind of man who can carry purpose with discipline and vision with integrity. Growth is not automatic. It's intentional. And adversity, though painful, is the soil where strength takes root. But only if you choose to rise, only if you're willing to fight, only if you decide that this pain will serve you, not stop you. Because when a man has no one but God, he is not waiting for rescue. He is being refined for greatness, and in that fire he either grows or he dies, but he cannot do both. Greatness is not born in the spotlight. It's not forged in celebration. It doesn't rise from applause or emerge from comfort. Greatness begins in the quiet, in the shadows, in the silence where no one is watching and no one is cheering. It begins in solitude, with nothing but the weight of your thoughts, the ache in your chest, and the whisper of God pressing you forward. Every man who has ever left a mark on this world first walked a path alone. Before the platform, there was a process. Before the influence, there was isolation. And in that isolation, something eternal was planted, a seed invisible to others, deeply buried beneath pain, rejection, or failure, but alive and full of power. The world doesn't see that seed. They see the fruit later. They see the success. They see the strength. But they don't see the nights when that man cried out to God with no answer. They don't see the doubts he had to fight, the fears he had to face, or the loneliness he had to overcome. They don't see the struggle between who he was and who he was becoming, but God saw it, and God was using it, because solitude is not punishment, it's preparation. When a man is alone with God, his soul is tilled like soil. The distractions are removed, the masks fall away, and the voice of destiny grows louder. What once seemed distant becomes clear. What once felt impossible starts to feel inevitable, not because the burden is gone, but because now the man knows who walks with him. There's a reason so many world changers started in obscurity, because greatness doesn't need permission to grow. It just needs space, and often God clears the crowd so you can finally start becoming who he designed you to be, not for popularity, but for purpose. So if you find yourself alone, misunderstood, overlooked, do not curse that season, embrace it. That is where the roots go deep. That is where the vision becomes unshakable. That is where the fire is lit, not by man's hand, but by the breath of God. Because when a man has no one but God, he is not buried. He is planted, and soon enough, what was planted in private will rise in power, not for the applause of men, but for the fulfillment of purpose. Absolutely, here's a powerful conclusion to bring the entire speech home, tying every point together in a way that echoes with finality, strength, and vision. So now you see, when a man has no one but God, he is not cursed, he is called. Called to rise without applause, called to build without affirmation, called to walk through fire, not to be burned, but to be forged. Alone is where the mask comes off. Alone is where the mission is revealed. Alone is where faith stops being a concept and becomes your lifeline. It's where your weakness meets divine strength. It's where your excuses die and your purpose comes alive. The world may think you've lost everything. Let them think it, because you've gained what matters most. You've found the source that can never be taken, the voice that never leaves, the hand that never lets go, and with that, you are no longer just a man. You are a man on a mission. So take heart in the silence, stand firm in the storm, and remember this: when a man has no one but God, he has more than enough to become everything he was born to be. Now rise, the world is waiting for the man you're about to become.